Hey everyone, Lenny Pinna here again at my home in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It's a dreary Sunday. So I thought I would try to create a little outdoor garden indoors to assist me in talking about this Bath and Body Works candle Off the Vine and its accompanying hand wash Off the Vine. I'm going to have lots of little stories to talk about because this candle kind of talks about or relates to different aspects of my life in different time periods and different places. And so I was very interested in the concept of this candle or this scent. When I first was introduced to it, I was with Bonnie at her Bath and Body Works in Cleveland area. And even the sales rep said, "What do you think about it?" And I was like, "I think it's interesting on first whiff because, I don't know, the vegetation got me, the sort of tomato leaf vegetation. I think there was an expressed that wasn't really liked, and I'm getting the sense that this probably isn't a candle that most people would like or many people would like, but I want to talk about it. So I'm going to talk first about the ingredients, and that'll lead on. So the ingredients are heirloom tomato, garden geranium, and Mediterranean moss. Heirloom tomatoes. That is a whole story in itself for me. I had grown up here in Pennsylvania, had never known what an heirloom tomato was until I moved to California. And once I was introduced to heirloom tomatoes, I thought I was in heaven. I mean, summertime with all the multicolored, multi-shaped kind of heirloom tomatoes were amazing. The smell, the taste, the juiciness were just amazing. So anybody that's in a part of the country that gets heirloom tomatoes, they know what I'm talking about. And those of us who, like where I grew up, mostly get the homogeneous looking orange tomatoes or hydroponic grown orange tomatoes. You don't quite know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to talk about it. So this is an example of sort of heirloom cherry tomatoes, and I got these at the grocery store, and they have the characteristic of what I think a lot of people get, and that is they have a slightly anemic smell. And that's because they're probably picked too early when they're not ripe and are allowed to ripen in their containers en route to wherever they're being shipped. But as you know, when you get a homegrown tomato, whether it's a typical orange one or an heirloom tomato, the scent from those tomatoes are in a class all by themselves. And so the fact that they wrote heirloom tomatoes on this, for the ingredients on this candle, gave me a certain expectation. What I want to say, just in general, is the heirloom tomatoes that they talk about end up being a little bit more like these that I talked about, with a slightly anemic smell. So, on first whiff, now when it was just cold, mostly what I was getting was the vegetation, sort of like the leaves of the tomato plant, the leaves of the geranium, and very little fruit or floral. Upon lighting it, it did start to slowly bring in those other elements. I wish they were a lot stronger. Well, at least the tomato part. There is a little bit more of a geranium floral that begins to enter into the mix of the scent. For a little while, I started to detect what seemed like, as I was walking around the house, I'm like, oh, that kind of reminds me of a very mild scent of what tomato sauce cooking on the stove might be like. And sometimes, you know, when tomato sauce on the stove overcooks, there's a little bit of a burnt quality at the bottom. It's not that, but the tomato sauce the tomato sauce scent that I was sensing was very mild, but it also was kind of dark, acidic, and dark maybe because it was like overcooked a little bit. What I was really hoping for with this whole heirloom tomatoes thing was for the sweetness of heirloom tomatoes with the acidity, but the sweetness and the juiciness. That's what I was really, really hoping for. And so that's not present for me. It's a medium scent that gets thrown around pretty well. It registered upstairs from the downstairs, and but it stayed in that kind of mild floral with vegetation. The moss, I think the dark moss, is what's giving it that vegetal quality. I have a feeling that they didn't really put tomato or geranium leaves in here, but the moss kind of evokes that. Out of curiosity, I took this candle down to the basement, and here's the reason. First of all, if I wanted to love this candle. I wish I loved this candle. I appreciate this candle, but I wish I loved it, because I would love to have this candle in the kitchen area at any time to just evoke that sense of, you know me with Italian food, I would like to just have that sense of a light tomato sauce with a little bit of the geranium floral permeating the kitchen. It's not quite that. It has a little bit more of the, I'm going to say, strength and slight bitterness of the greens. And the vegetal quality is nice. I think it would be really nice if it were balanced with some sweetness from really juicy heirloom tomatoes. So I thought another way I could maybe enjoy this is bringing it down to the basement. And you're probably wondering, like, why? Here's where it intersects with my life. I grew up in an Italian family, and the basement of both of my grandparents' homes had a kitchen. Italians typically have two kitchens, the upstairs kitchen for every day and the downstairs kitchen for when they're really getting into cooking big pots of things, or canning, or maybe even cooking a tomato sauce, a big pot of tomato sauce. But the downstairs kitchen is that very earthy place, that informal place. And it's really very much like the heart of the home in certain ways. So I was taught how to grow tomatoes from my grandfather, who lived down the street. And so tomatoes are very important to me, which is why when I moved back from California here, I had a friend. I knew he was going to visit me in the spring. In the fall, I had him pick out heirloom tomatoes, slice them, put thin slices of them on paper towel to dry out the seeds so that he could bring them to me in the spring so that I could start the seeds indoors like my grandfather taught me, and then I would grow them here. And sure enough, that's what happened. My friend Ralph brought the paper towels with this thin dried slices of heirloom tomatoes. I started those seeds like in late February, early March, and they started to become beautiful plants, and I grew them in my yard. I probably had over 20 plants in my yard, and they were getting high, and they were just looking so robust. And the green tomatoes started coming in, and then they were starting to ripe. Well, here in Pennsylvania, there are deer, like other places, and the deer started eating the tops of all of my tomato plants. Then some of the ripening tomatoes on the bottom of the plant were being gnawed on by the groundhogs in the area. Sure enough, after a little while, my tomato plants were virtually decimated. I mean, the deer just kept eating and eating and eating down, and the groundhogs were eating up. I had the middle layer of heirloom tomatoes that were green and slightly ripening. And like these, I had to pick them early in order to try to have some sense of tomato. And you know what? I tried to ripen them the way my grandfather showed me, and wrapping them in newspaper and putting them in a paper bag in the dark. And they just weren't ripening. Those heirloom tomatoes wanted that full sun, that full nurturing on the vine. So, I have not been growing any tomatoes in my garden since, because I just can't go through that heartache after spending that much time trying to have heirloom tomatoes. I will say what I have here are some grapevines, which I thought I would just to include the vininess sense along with the little orange avens. Some of you have already seen the peony and the roses. And I'm going to also talk about the scent of off the vine hand soap, which I've been using, and I like when I'm in the kitchen with it or in the home with it. it does bring that gardeny sense. And by the way, if you're wondering, look at this shirt I'm wearing. This is a very old shirt. This is my gardening shirt. So you're going to see frayed collar, the sleeves that have just worn right off. But this is my very comfy gardening shirt. I wore it a lot when I was working in the plant nursery. So what I want to say is it brings that kind of outdoor garden sense to me in the kitchen. And I love it. And I will say, having burnt this candle, I am getting just a tiny bit more of the slight tomato in this hand wash that I wasn't getting. At first, I was just getting the dark greens, the vegetation. The interesting thing is, I used this the other day, and I then went out into the car to drive away, and immediately I was like, "What am I smelling?" It was like, what's in my car that's smelling? And then I realized my hands, which were near the steering wheel, were emanating the off the vine scent. And in the car, off the vine scent was really coming across as old car air freshener to cover up the oldness of the interior of the car. It was not very nice. So I want to say that I did not enjoy this in a very closed space. I think this scent, if you're going to like it at all, needs to have an airiness about it, like the garden, because in a closed space, the greens or the dark, the edginess of the greens could kind of turn bitter and in the smell. And that sweetness, if there's any sweetness from the geranium or the tomato, it kind of recedes in a smaller space. But in a larger space, I think it stays a little bit more dispersed and blended with the touch of sweetness, very slight touch. I wish there were more. I want to love this candle. I want somebody to someday have a real heirloom tomato candle that really combines the sweetness of heirloom tomatoes with the earthy greens of the tomato plant. And if they're going to put geraniums, yes, the balance of those geranium leaves have a strong scent too, but geraniums also have a strong perfume. So if they could get the right balance of all of that, I think it would be a really great candle that I would love. So in concept, I love this scent. I love what it is trying to be. It doesn't quite get there in different ways for me, but I'm going to at least keep washing my hands in the kitchen or in the basement after I return from working in the garden and wash my hands with this, and that brings the outdoors indoors. The candle, I think if I'm going to burn it at all, it's going to be in the basement. It's not really appealing in the kitchen or the rest of the house for me like I would like it to be. It's not offensive, but I don't think it's a scent. It's distinctive, but I don't think it's a scent that most people are going to like. But there may be some who get into that earthiness of the green and just a slight little sweetness of the geranium that may appreciate it on some level. So I'm here with my tea, and it says on my cup, the garden is my happy place, and it really is. And so today I brought the happiness of my garden indoors to talk about these scents, or this scent, both in candle and in body wash. Thanks again for joining me. I'll have a few more videos from Goose Creek and Kringle coming up during the week, and so I'll look forward to seeing you then. Have a great evening. Thanks. Ciao, everyone.